The typical consensus on Dabura's role in the Majin Boo arc tends to be him having a cool premise, but being wasted. This seems reasonable at first, but it is a stance that ignores some of the details, and, most importantly, the purpose behind Dabura's character. First, it's worth going over some broader details on Dabura's character that separate him from the typical henchman in the series. Unlike many unwilling to supersede their master's opinion, Dabura gives some meaningful input or authority to Babidi's plans, and still has enough willpower to actively go against decisions, such as seeing the flaw in Babidi's attempt to control Boo, or less talked about, him making it clear later he could have done far better in his fight with Gohan, despite Babidi's instructions, which some mindlessly write off as an inconsistency, rather than wishing to analyse Dabura's character, or forgetting he explicitly says he wants to have fun fighting them. Also, before anyone brings up the Dragon Box stating Gohan had greater strength, that's for the anime version of the fight, which is far different from the manga. So the point is moot unless you'd also argue pure Boo to be the strongest Boo in the manga purely using what the anime says. The fight with Gohan shows a lot about how Dabura operates outside of Babidi's orders, with him using his magic that could easily dispose of Gohan, if not competent enough, rather than deal enough damage to fuel Boo, despite Gohan being the one taking the toll from the fight. We can tell from this, and Dabura's smile at parts of their fight, that he's enjoying humouring Gohan after the latter was adamant on facing him alone. Instances such as his spit being more of a test to Gohan, and showing Dabura's desire to face opponents fun enough to pass the time with. After all, he had gone at least centuries without seeing a mortal with a power of 3000 Kiri, that bring what may have been decent enough punching bags to a genuine reason for him to fight. It's also during the fight that he listens to Vegeta and becomes aware of not just Vegeta's darker attributes, but how strong he and Goku consider themselves compared to Gohan, and it's here we see a change in Dabura's character, with him foregoing facing all three in favour of trying to make a new peer out of Vegeta. Even if he can easily dispose of Gohan when wanting to, things don't seem so hopeful against two far stronger and more skilled. It's in this that we also see an ability to read the situation and turn a power disadvantage into an advantage that hadn't really been seen in the Z era amongst henchmen to the same extent other than Ginyu. It's these traits that make Dabura the second most dynamic henchman in the series, the first obviously being Black, going from a servant to the leading villain. On to his role as kin of the Makai. This addition to the lore of the series is quite a major one that makes some view Dabura as a waste in having not been made into the main villain of this or another arc. It's true that there's more than enough components to have Dabura be more of a threat than he was, but that's ignoring the purpose he plays in the Majin Boo arc. Dabura seems intimidating and grandiose from the outset, and that's what makes it in line with Toriyama's style. His role is reduced to that of a henchman, just like how Toriyama had inverted or gone against certain expectations in ways consistent with the manga ever since the start, with things such as Electra Senin, the protagonist losing the major tournament arc, twice at that, or a villain's final form being far less outwardly intimidating than what came before, which were all innovative ideas at the time, and the last point not only being one in which no more recent shonen work has replicated well, but important to the Majin Boo arc in specific. I've talked much before of how this arc had a back-to-basics approach to tone, fantasy, and going against what had become tropes of the series, and Dabura's role adds to all three, with his intimidating appearance being belied by the Saiyan's attitude continued, his role easing the series back into a focus on Eastern fantasy, and not going by what Torishima had forced Toriyama to do in attempting to make each Shinzo Ningen more intimidating in appearance, even if it was the right decision with Cell. Another thing I've talked about is how Boo's role helped him be an antithesis to Goku, of which Dabura, even with his desire for battle, couldn't effectively do as an antagonist unless making Gohan the protagonist of the Boo arc, which, despite a lot of fans supporting that, would come at the cost of many aspects of character dynamics and theme exploration that made the Boo arc as conclusive as it was, and is an example of everything sounding good in premise. Dabura may open up the potential of exploring the Makai, but that wasn't necessary for the narrative. The Saiyans had long since surpassed what gods they knew of, and Toriyama had talked of the general idea of the Cell arc being the Dragon Team surpassing foes beyond the borders of time. At this point, it's more than consistent that the greatest warrior of another realm was a moderate challenge at best. It's through this that we see an overlooked aspect of Shin, in him at times being an audience representation, getting caught up in the hype of others, or even himself, but not realising just how far the Dragon Team has come. On the subject of Gohan, it's no coincidence or merely a display of his rustiness he was made Dabura's primary opponent. Gohan's character arc is one heavily associated with Buddhist ideas of demons, his maternal grandfather being based on Newmore Wang, or Ox Demonkin from Shioji, or Journey to the West. The Saiyans Gohan is descended from having such an evil nature that Piccolo looks favourable, along with the villainous trio in the Saiyan arc, or Vegeta in specific, drawn inspiration from another Shioji demon, the six-eared macaque, and Gohan being taught by one who once had a demon nature. As I've gone into before, these draw from the Buddhist ideas that a demon nature is something that can be purged as one increases their Buddha nature, as we see with Piccolo's character arc, and makes this a battle between one rooted in ideas of Eastern demons and the ability to purge evil from themselves, versus one who clearly represents the more unchanging and purely evil idea of a Western demon. On top of that, Gohan is a character whose usage of the Super Saiyan forms is the most relevant to Boo's revival, and the one of this trio to have the least control of how he can utilize it, being a clear display of the Yan energy associated with the form, rather than its balance of Yin and Yang, whereas Dabura's more hidden magical skills make him rooted in Yin symbolism. Gohan is also someone whose arc of natures is the reverse of his father, starting as a child with a clear Buddha nature, whereas his utilization of his rage, and eventually bringing it out in the form of Super Saiyan 2, increase his demon nature. This makes Dabura an important reflection of his demon nature, and adds to why he cannot bring out the same rage as against Cell, with how similar his attitude can be to Gohan when he lets power get to his head. It also adds to why Gohan, not having the rage to accomplish this, was beneficial, as letting the demon nature slip out would make him a target of Babidi's magic, but without the willpower of Vegeta to best it. Dabura's other role as a reflection is with Cell, as has been debated extensively ever since Goku compared them. Without turning this into a versus topic, though that may be a video of its own if there's enough demand, I'd say Goku was comparing him to what we saw of Cell's peak. There's several reasons why, such as it being arbitrary to compare him to anything less, or the lack of lightning not being the most consistent thing to argue Gohan wasn't a Super Saiyan 2, but the main one relevant to this video is that anything less makes Dabura's role in the narrative redundant. The events on Babidi's spaceship are to show how far Goku and Vegeta have come in their skill and power, with Dabura serving as a benchmark to how they stack up to Cell, and how Gohan's skill decreasing and inability to harness his rage has had him stagnate. This also works as a parallel, in more than a benchmark, with Cell representing the peaks of human science, whereas Dabura represents the depth of magic that help build up Majin Boo. All that said, could there have been more done with Dabura? Perhaps with some major rewrites or him being brought back in Super for whatever reason, especially now that Gohan has gained what can be considered the perfect utilization of his demon nature. That isn't to say that his role in the Majin Boo arc was mishandled though, with his role having him shine as a henchman character, reflection of many ideas of the story, and help him build up the actual threat as an effective supporting villain should. One thing I leave as a final note is the anime portraying him as being changed by being sent to heaven as a punishment. There are some interesting aspects, such as showing the impact a different environment can provide, or how aspects of pride he had before can bring out more noble ideas when allowing them to flourish. One issue with this though is that the wish to revive all good people when death isn't the cutoff point for the soul's nature makes him staying dead a plot hole for the anime. But you can watch this what if for an idea on what would happen if he had been brought back by it.